So we're going to have a little chat about death, more importantly, the breath. And what is it? My parents, very sadly but beautifully, uh, putting down our family dog today, beautiful 14-year-old border collie. And just over the last couple of days, since his health really declined, it's made me reflect again on death and what is death? What is it that's happening in the process? And it's a powerful meditation. It's a powerful tool to be able to do. And I really invite you and encourage you to reflect on, what death represents for you. But for me, it's inherently linked to breath, because when I sat with our beautiful border collie named Jax the other day, his breathing was quite raspy. He was noticeably struggling to inhale and exhale. And it made me really reflect on, well, what happens like in that moment or in that transition from living to dying? What's taking place? And the most unanimous response that I can bring it back to is the breath. And there's this standard line that I use in my breathwork workshops and when I'm teaching breathing practices. And it's around the concept of, if our breath was our spirit or our spirit was our breath, and every inhale, more spirit enters, and every exhale, spirit leaves, and it is becoming a part of or interrelating with what a lot of indigenous traditions call Great Spirit, or Wakantanka, Viracocha, these different names in different, cultures, that then the dying process is simply the spirit returning to the Great Spirit and continuing almost like the wind. And the wind comes and the wind blows. And where does the wind come from and where does the wind go? Well, that in itself is omnipotent and omnipresent, and it's everywhere at any time, in any moment. And so I've delved a little bit deeper and reflected on, this concept of the breath, and breath being seen as a vehicle of life, and death being that moment that the breath or the spirit returns to its source. And there's so much moving within me at the moment. I've spent most of the morning in tears, crying, because my parents have made that gut-wrenching decision that our beautiful, boy is going to be euthanized today and put out of his suffering. He's had a lot of pain. He's been struggling to walk. And so reflecting on this, notion, if you look at Christianity, the breath and the spirit, and linguistically and spiritually, they're the same concept. And if you read the Bible and the scripture and the terminology, it's actually quite complicated the way that it's worded, but in its essence, it's communicating the same thing. And so the Hebrew word, which is, the Hebrew words are very much the basis of, a lot of the biblical terminology. The word Ruach, R-U-A-C-H, means breath, wind, or spirit. And then the Greek word, the way that I would say it is Pneuma, which is like pneumonia, Pneuma, P-N-E-U-M-A, also means breath or spirit. And in the creation story, God breathed life into Adam and he became a living soul. As the Creator created life, he breathed life. I think the specific line is around, he breathed dust into Adam and Adam became a living soul. So that suggests that life begins with a divine breath that enters the body. If somebody's been unconscious for a period of time and then breath returns, they come back online. So when a person dies, and this is from very much the Christian viewpoint, when a person dies, the breath or the spirit returns to God, or an animal, or a creature, and the body returns to the earth. Many Christian mystics interpret death as the release of the spirit that was temporarily inhabiting the body. So let's say every living creature that breathes, that inhales and exhales, the breath or the spirit is inhibiting a body. And then when its time is up, whatever, the keeper of that clock is, God, spirit, a higher power, maybe there's just a divine natural intelligence. And then in those final moments, the breath is then given back to the great spirit or the source. So in the Gospels, it says that in Jesus' life that he breathed his last and gave up his spirit. Again, linking the last breath with the release of the spirit. So the core idea in Christianity is that life equals the divine breath in the body, and that death equals that breath or spirit returning to God. It therefore begs the question of we are God, this is God, we're all a part of God, the one true living great spirit. And so then you look in Buddhism then approaches the question a little differently, but it does not teach a permanent soul. It doesn't say that there's this permanent soul, but it still teaches that the breath is central to life and to dying. So in Buddhist practice, the breath or the anapana is the bridge between the body and consciousness. And then meditation, which is obviously a core part of Buddhism, trains awareness through the breath. So it trains our conscious awareness through the breath. And in Tibetan Buddhism especially, the final breath, that final exhale, marks the dissolution of the elements of the body. And so what happens in the Tibetan Buddhism view is that when we die, the earth element dissolves, which is like our meat suit. The water dissolves. The fire, our spirit or our essence, dissolves. And the wind, the breath or the prana, also dissolves. So when that subtle wind energy stops moving, our spirit stops moving, consciousness then separates from the physical body. And in the Tibetan teachings, that final exhalation is consciousness exiting the body. And then the subtle wind, or the grandmother wind, or the great wind in indigenous cultures, carries the consciousness into bardo, which is the intermediate state, or purgatory in Christianity or Catholicism. So the core idea with Buddhism is that breath is the vehicle of consciousness. It carries consciousness. And then when the breath stops, consciousness disengages from the body, and we're no longer living, or not in this body. So then you look at the Kabbalah, which is the Jewish mysticism. The Kabbalah provides one of the most detailed teachings on the breath and the soul. The Hebrew word for soul levels is all connected to the breath. So they have nefesh, which is life force that is tied to the body and the blood. You go through and connect the dots with Christianity, you hear this term of the body and the blood of Christ all the time, which is the life force. Ruach, the same word as Christianity, R-U-A-C-H, is the spirit, or literally the breath or the wind. And then you have neshama, which is the divine soul or the higher breath. So in Genesis, there's a phrase that is nishmat chahim, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. And nishmat chahim translates to the breath of life. The Kabbalah teaches that every breath is a micro cycle of life and death. The inhale receiving divine energy, the exhale returning it to God. Now that's pretty beautiful and powerful. So at death, a great way to look at death is that nefesh, which is the life force or the body and the blood, returns to the earth. Ruach, which was the spirit, literally the breath or the wind, returns to the spiritual realm. And then neshama, the divine soul or the higher breath or the higher self, returns to its divine source. So therefore, in the Kabbalah, death is understood not as annihilation, not as, the finite point, but it is the soul's layers then separating and returning to their origin. So it's a pretty cool core idea, in my opinion, where it's the continuous exchange between human and the divine, human and the divine. So the shared insights between Christianity, Buddhism, the Kabbalah, many other traditions as well, is that the breath is the bridge between the body and the spirit. And that in Christianity, breath is God's animating life force. So without breath, there's no life. Buddhism, breath is the carrier of the consciousness. It's the carrier of the lights being on. And the Kabbalah is the exchange between the soul and the divine, and the soul and the divine. So in death, in this beautiful concept of dying, in all three traditions, it is marked by the same moment. The final breath. Not merely the body stopping, but the spirit of consciousness withdrawing from the physical form and returning to the source. So a simple way to see it. So if you're supporting someone through the dying process, if you've been, we've all been affected by death. But a beautiful way to look at it across all of these traditions is that the first breath is spirit entering the body. The last breath is spirit leaving the body. And this is why in many mystical traditions, the teachings say that we spend our whole lives breathing between 2 points and 2 mysteries. And this is how indigenous traditions, yogic philosophies, even some scientific models are teaching about the human spirit. It is an exchange, it is a process, it is a cycle. Every ending has a new beginning. So death can be a beautiful teacher. I'm really holding at the moment, the transition of our beautiful border collie over to the divine, over to Great Spirit, and for his spirit to become a part of the one Great Spirit. And so this is why, we talk about people that are deceased still being with us. They're in the rustle of the wind on our skin. They're in the breath that we're breathing. They're in the birds and the animals and the nature that reminds us of them. So what does death mean for you? What does the process of life ceasing in this physical body mean for you? And I believe by reflecting on this, by meditating on death and what it means, we actually create a huge amount of freedom and acceptance in our life. I know for me, grief is a beautiful teacher. It's the highest form of love. We're grieving. It means we've loved the thing that was in that physical body or in that physical situation, that relationship, that job, that person. If we're grieving, it means we held a lot of love for it, and we still do. And the love never dissipates. The energy of that may transition into another part of this Great Spirit, but it's never lost. If this was helpful, please like it, share it, leave a comment of how it landed for you. And most importantly, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. It does help. Have a beautiful day.